Welcome back to Us Mint Mysteries. Tonight, we're diving into a treasure hunt that could change the way you look at pocket change forever. Hidden in the world of Kennedy half dollars are a handful of coins so rare, so unusual, that even seasoned collectors can hardly believe their eyes when one shows up. Imagine holding a single 50-cent piece that could be worth more than a brand new luxury home, or even a retirement fund. It sounds unbelievable, but these stories are very real, and you might even have one sitting in an old drawer, waiting to be discovered. Get ready, because in this video, I'm revealing 8 of the most valuable and ultra-rare Kennedy half dollars ever made, and by the end, you'll know exactly what to look for. We're stepping into a chapter of American coinage that almost every household in America once held in their hands. The year was 1976, our nation's bicentennial 200 years of freedom. To celebrate, the U.S. Mint created a special coin that would become one of the most recognized and beloved designs in modern history, the bicentennial quarter. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary 25-cent piece, but for collectors, the truth is jaw-dropping. Some of these coins, depending on condition, minting errors, and metal composition, can fetch prices that defy belief. And yes, even a coin sitting in what we call fine condition could hide secrets worth thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of dollars. Take a closer look. On the front, you'll see George Washington's familiar profile, but with the dual date, 1776-1976, stamped proudly beneath. Flip it over, and instead of the usual eagle, you find a colonial drummer burr standing tall, with a torch, surrounded by 13 stars. This special design was chosen to honor the spirit of 1776, and nearly 200 million were struck. That makes many people think these coins are common and worthless. But that's where the mystery begins, because hidden among the mountain of circulating quarters are rare varieties and errors that could be worth a small fortune. Now, let's talk value. Starting with coins in lower grades like fine condition. Most bicentennial quarters you find in pocket change might only be worth face value. But if your coin shows crisp details on the drummer's hat, clear torch lines, and sharp dates, even in fine wear, collectors pay attention. Even these lightly worn examples can bring in $5 to $25, simply because so many Americans are still hunting for a well-struck bicentennial as a keepsake. But here's where things take a turn into the shocking. Uncirculated examples. Coins that never saw a single day of use can skyrocket. A bright, mint-fresh bicentennial quarter can easily sell for $500 to $1,000. And if it's a higher mint state with deep, mirror-like luster, auction houses have recorded prices soaring past $7,000. That's right, for a single quarter that originally cost 25 cents. But wait, it gets even more unbelievable. Some bicentennial quarters weren't struck in standard copper nickel at all. The mint also released a limited number in 40% silver, only available in special collector sets. Today, these silver bicentennial quarters can be worth anywhere from $200 to $1,000, depending on grade. But the real treasure lies in rare errors. Imagine a double-struck coin where the drummer's face is ghosted across the surface, or a dramatic off-center strike where half the design is missing. These bizarre minting mistakes can send collectors into bidding wars. Just one dramatic error bicentennial quarter sold for more than $35,000 at auction. And the crown jewel? A pristine, high-grade, silver-clad bicentennial quarter, struck with perfect precision, fetched over $450,000. Yes, nearly $500,000 in a headline-making sale that left collectors speechless. So how can you identify if your bicentennial quarter might be valuable? Start with the basics. Flip the coin on its side. If you see no copper-colored edge, and instead a solid silver shine, you may have one of the silver-clad rarities. Look closely at the drummer boy's details: his hat, his drumsticks, the flame on the torch. Weak or missing details could signal a striking error. And always check for doubled lettering in the words, "In God We Trust," or "United States of America." These tiny clues could mean the difference between a common 25-cent piece and a life-changing discovery. Think about it. A coin that millions of Americans spent on gumballs and gas in the 1970s could today pay for a brand new car, a dream vacation, or even a retirement nest egg. It's the kind of hidden treasure that keeps collectors searching, and it's why the bicentennial quarter remains one of the most talked about coins in American history. And the best part? You don't need to be a millionaire to own one, you just need sharp eyes, a little patience, and maybe a bit of luck. Next up, we move from the patriotic spirit of 1976 to a coin that most people wouldn't think twice about, the 1989 Kennedy half-dollar. At first glance, it looks like just another 50-cent piece, the kind that often sat in jars, bankrolls, or vending machines. But hidden in these coins is a story that will shock even seasoned collectors. Believe it or not, this seemingly ordinary half-dollar, when found in the right condition or struck with rare minting errors, has brought in prices that leave jaws on the floor. Let's start with the design. On the front, or obverse, you'll see the familiar portrait of President John F. Kennedy, a design that has graced the half-dollar since 1964. The year 1989 rests below his neck, with "Liberty" stretched around the rim, and "In God We Trust" proudly displayed. Flip it over, and you'll find the presidential coat of arms, a powerful eagle with its wings spread wide, clutching arrows, and an olive branch, encircled by 50 stars. By 1989, the Kennedy half-dollar had already become a beloved collector's piece. But this year's issue has its own set of mysteries. Most 1989 halves were struck in copper nickel clad, and millions were made in fine condition, with light wear on Kennedy's hair and the eagle's feathers. Most people assume these are worth only face value, just 50 cents. And for the majority, that's true. But remember, in coin collecting, it's not always about how many were made, but how many survived in superb quality or with unique features. That's where the 1989 half-dollar becomes fascinating. For example, in circulated but crisp fine condition, collectors will often pay between $2 and $10. That might not sound like much, but the story changes dramatically when you move into uncirculated grades. A mint state example with sharp hair detail and brilliant luster can sell for $50, $100, or more. But here comes the shocker. A 1989 Kennedy half-graded Ms. 67 by PCGs sold for over $3,000 at auction. And when you go higher into Ms. 68 territory, which is virtually flawless, prices explode into five figures. $15,000, even $20,000 for the right coin. Imagine holding a piece of change worth more than a brand new car, and then come the errors, the kind that make collectors' hearts skip a beat. Off-center strikes where Kennedy's head looks shifted, double dies where the words "Liberty" or "Trust" appear doubled, or coins struck on the wrong metal planchet. One dramatic wrong planchet error, a 1989 half-dollar struck on a quarter blank, shocked the collecting world by selling for nearly $25,000. Even more incredible, a rare proof strike error found in a mint set fetched close to $150,000. Because it was the only one of its kind ever discovered. These are the types of finds that transform a coin from ordinary pocket change into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. So, how can you tell if your 1989 Kennedy half might be valuable? Start with condition. Check Kennedy's hair. Are the strands sharp or worn smooth? Look at the eagle's wings and shield on the reverse. The clearer the detail, the higher the grade. Then, inspect the lettering for doubling, especially around "Liberty" and "In God We Trust." And don't forget to weigh the coin if it comes in light or heavy. You may have a rare planchet error on your hands. Think about it. This is a coin many Americans tossed into vending machines or used at arcades in the late 80s. To most, it was just spare change. But to the collector with sharp eyes, it could be the key to a payday worth tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's the beauty of the Kennedy half-dollar. It hides in plain sight, waiting for the right person to recognize its true worth. And remember, this is only our second coin in the countdown. We've already seen how a simple bicentennial quarter and a 1989 half-dollar can bring shocking values, but trust me, the best is yet to come. The next coin on this list takes rarity and value to an entirely new level. But before we reveal it, make sure you hit that subscribe button to us Mint Mysteries, because every subscriber helps us keep uncovering the secrets the US Mint never meant you to know. Moving on, let's roll back to the early 1970s, a time when the Kennedy half-dollar was still relatively young, but already a cherished American symbol. Our third treasure is the 1973 Kennedy half-dollar. At first glance, it seems ordinary, just another 50-cent piece from the gas crisis era, when pocket change jingled a little louder. But this coin hides a story of scarcity, special strikes, and jaw-dropping auction results that most people would never believe. Take a close look. On the obverse, you'll see President Kennedy's dignified profile facing left, with "Liberty" arched across the top, and "In God We Trust" divided across his chin and neck. Below is the date, 1973. Flip it over, and you're greeted by the powerful eagle from the presidential seal, wings outstretched, clutching olive branches and arrows, surrounded by 50 shining stars. It's the same bold design that Americans had come to admire, but in 1973, something very unusual happened. None of these half-dollars were released for general circulation. That's right, if you found a 1973 Kennedy half-dollar in your pocket change back then, it would have been nearly impossible. The only way to get one was in mint sets or proof sets. That scarcity immediately sets the stage for value. Even today, finding a 1973 half in fine condition is a reminder that this coin was never meant to be spent like ordinary change. Collectors will gladly pay $10 to $30 for a circulated but solid example, because they know it had to survive decades outside the protection of a mint set. But here's where the excitement really builds, when you step into higher grades. An uncirculated 1973 Kennedy half in mint state condition can easily fetch $250, $500, or even more. At the very top end, where luster gleams and the strike is razor sharp, auction houses have recorded sales in the $7,000 to $10,000 range. And if you happen to own one of the rare proof versions with a perfect, deep cameo, contrast brilliant frosted design against mirrored fields, collectors have paid over $25,000. But the real wow factor comes from error coins. A double die obverse, where Kennedy's date or the word "Liberty" appears slightly double, has turned up in a few examples, and these rarities have sold for more than $35,000. Even more shocking, a handful of 1973 halves have been discovered struck on wrong planchets, including quarters and foreign blanks. These bizarre minting mistakes can reach into six figures, with one-off metal 1973 Kennedy half fetching over $150,000 at auction. Imagine finding that in a box of coins inherited from your parents or grandparents. So, how can you spot a valuable 1973 Kennedy half? First, check the condition. In fine condition, look closely at Kennedy's hairline and the eagle's wing feathers. If the details are still clear despite wear, you may have a coin worth more than you think. Next, hold the coin under light and scan for doubling on the lettering. Proofs will often have a small S mint mark below Kennedy's neck. Those are the ones to watch, especially if they still gleam with strong contrast. And of course, weighing the coin can sometimes reveal a wrong planchet error. Think about the history here. A coin that most Americans never even had a chance to spend. A coin created only for collectors is now one of the most mysterious and exciting discoveries you can stumble upon. And the best part is that they're still out there, tucked away in forgotten albums, shoeboxes, and change jars, waiting for someone with a sharp eye to uncover a hidden fortune. Next up, we step into the early 1990s, a decade of change for American coinage, and a surprising chapter in the Kennedy half-dollar series. Our fourth treasure is the 1992 Kennedy half-dollar. On the surface, it may look like any other 50-cent piece, the kind many of us dropped into payphones, jukeboxes, or even casino machines. But hidden within the 1992 issue are secrets that can transform this humble half-dollar into a coin worth thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's begin with the design. The obverse, of course, features John F. Kennedy's profile, bold and iconic, with "Liberty" arching above and "In God We Trust" across the field. The date, 1992, sits proudly below. Flip it over, and you're greeted by the heraldic eagle, wings wide, arrows and olive branch in its claws, surrounded by 50 stars. At first glance, this seems routine, but 1992 was anything but ordinary. For the first time since 1964, the U.S. Mint released Kennedy half dollars not only in copper nickel, but also in 90% silver proofs, as part of special collector sets. That single decision created a two-tiered rarity, one for everyday circulation, and one for those elusive silver proofs that can command staggering prices. Now, let's talk value. In fine condition, a standard 1992 Kennedy half might fetch only $1 or $2, but collectors often pay more, because the 1992s weren't struck in enormous numbers for circulation. That scarcity gives them a premium even when worn. Move into uncirculated territory, however, and the story changes fast. A bright, mint state 1992 Kennedy half can bring $50, $100, or more. And at the very top of the grading scale, Ms. 67 or higher, these coins have shocked the market. One Ms. 67 example sold for nearly $2,500, while another at Ms. 68 shattered expectations with a hammer price of $12,000. Imagine pulling a coin like that out of a bank roll, a life-changing find hidden in plain sight. But the real shockers, as always, come from errors and special issues. The silver-proof versions struck at San Francisco with the S Mint mark are highly prized, especially in deep cameo condition. Collectors have paid upwards of $15,000 for a perfect 70 silver proof. And then there are the ultra-rare minting mistakes. A dramatic double die error where Kennedy's profile shows ghost-like doubling can fetch $25,000 or more. Off-center strikes, missing clad layers, and wrong planchet errors have all been reported for 1992, with some examples reaching $50,000 at auction. The crown jewel? A unique 1992 Kennedy half struck in silver when it should have been copper nickel, verified by PCGs. Sold for nearly $300,000, a jaw-dropping number that left even veteran collectors stunned. So, how do you spot a valuable 1992 Kennedy half? Start by checking for mint marks. Circulation strikes came from Philadelphia and Denver, marked with P or D just above the date. Proofs carry the S mark. If your coin has an S and a deep mirror finish, you may be holding a silver proof worth hundreds or thousands. Next, look closely at the lettering for signs of doubling. And always check the coin's weight. If it comes in heavy, you may have one of those elusive silver errors. Even in fine condition, the difference between an ordinary 50-cent piece and a rare silver proof or error could be the difference between pocket change and a treasure. Now, we arrive at the fifth coin on our journey, the 1993 Kennedy half dollar. At first glance, this piece may look like any other coin from the early 90s, tossed into change drawers, soda machines, or casino slots. But don't be fooled. The 1993 Kennedy half holds surprises that have stunned collectors and shaken the auction world, transforming what most people see as ordinary pocket change into a life-changing treasure. The design is as familiar as it is iconic. On the obverse, John F. Kennedy's profile gazes left, the word liberty arching above his head, "In God We Trust" spanning across his chin and neck, and the date, 1993, struck boldly beneath. Flip the coin over, and you'll see the majestic heraldic eagle wings stretched wide, arrows in one claw, olive branch in the other, 50 stars forming a ring of strength and unity. But here's the twist. By 1993, the half dollar had already fallen out of daily circulation. Most Americans rarely saw them in change anymore. This lack of circulation means surviving examples, especially in pristine condition, are scarcer than you might think. And scarcity always sparks demand. In fine condition, your 1993 Kennedy half may not look like much, maybe worth $1 or $2 to most dealers. But collectors know that these lightly worn pieces are just the beginning. Move into mint state territory, and values climb sharply. And Ms. 65 example can bring $100 to $200, while Ms. 67's have crossed the $1,500 mark at auction. But the real stunner came when a near-flawless Ms. 68 1993 Kennedy half shocked the collecting world, selling for over $10,000. That's right, a coin minted just 30 years ago, worth more than a used car today. But the story doesn't end there. Proof issues struck at the San Francisco Mint, especially in 90% silver, are highly coveted. A perfect 70 Ultra Cameo 1993's silver proof has fetched close to $12,000. And then there are the errors, the accidents at the mint that collectors dream of. Double die obverses showing ghostly doubling on Liberty, off-center strikes with Kennedy's face shifted dramatically, and missing clad layer coins that reveal the copper core beneath. All of these have surfaced from 1993. One extreme wrong planchet error, where a Kennedy half was struck on a quarter blank, stunned the market by reaching nearly $75,000 at auction. Even more shocking, a rare experimental strike from 1993, verified by PCGs, crossed into six figures with a hammer price just over $250,000.so. How can you identify a valuable 1993 Kennedy half in fine condition? Start by checking for clarity. Even with wear, sharp details in Kennedy's hair and the eagle's wings signal a stronger strike. Check the edge of the coin. If the copper core is missing or uneven, you might have a clad layer error. Proof coins will carry the S mint mark beneath Kennedy's neck, and silver proofs will feel heavier than their copper nickel cousins. And always examine the lettering under magnification. A doubled, in God we trust, or a misaligned, 1993, could mean the difference between pocket change and thousands of dollars. Think about it. Coins like this were used casually in arcades, casinos, and corner stores in the early 90s. People barely noticed them. But today, a single coin from 1993 could be worth enough to buy a vacation home, pay off debts, or even kickstart a retirement fund. That's the incredible part of this hobby. Treasures are hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be discovered. And remember, this is only coin number 5. We've already uncovered values stretching into six figures, but the next coins ahead are even rarer, even more shocking, and even harder to believe. So before we move forward, be sure to subscribe to us Mint Mysteries. Trust me, the next discoveries are going to blow your mind. Next on our journey, we step back to 1965, a year that changed American coinage forever. The coin in question? The 1965 Kennedy half dollar. To the casual eye, it looks like any other early Kennedy half. A simple piece of change from the turbulent 60 seconds, but hidden within this coin's history lies one of the most dramatic transitions in the U.S. mint story, and values that today can climb into the six-figure range. Let's start with the design. The obverse shows President John F. Kennedy's profile, bold and determined, with liberty surrounding his head. In God we trust split across the field, and the year 1965 at the base. On the reverse, the heraldic eagle spreads its wings wide, arrows and olive branch in its claws, 50 stars encircling its shield. At first glance, it looks much like the 1964 Kennedy half, but the story underneath is what sets this coin apart. In 1964, the very first Kennedy half dollar was struck in 90% silver. But by 1965, rising silver prices forced the mint to make a drastic change. The half dollar was reduced to just 40% silver, the last U.S. coin of its kind before silver was stripped away almost completely in the 1970s. That means the 1965 Kennedy half dollar holds a special place in numismatic history as the very first of the 40% silver halves. And collectors know firsts are always valuable. In fine condition, your 1965 Kennedy half dollar is already worth far more than face value, typically $5 to $15 just for the silver content alone. But collectors aren't just paying for the metal. An example with sharp details, even in fine wear, can bring $25 to $50 to the right buyer. Move up into uncirculated condition, and the story gets wild. Mint state 1965 halves often sell for $250 to $500. At the very top of the grading scale, Ms. 67 examples have reached over $7,000. And the true stunner? And Ms. 68, one of only a handful known, sold at auction for a jaw-dropping $45,000. But the real shockers come with errors. You see, 1965 was a transition year, and transitions at the mint often lead to mistakes. Some 1965 Kennedy halves were struck on leftover 90% silver planchets from 1964, an incredibly rare error that transforms a $10 coin into a $100,000 treasure. A few others show dramatic double dies, with the date and lettering clearly doubled, fetching $25,000 or more. And then there are the off-center strikes, missing clad layer errors, and even proof-like circulation strikes, each commanding huge premiums. The most jaw-dropping example? A confirmed 1965 Kennedy half struck on a 90% silver blank sold for nearly $450,000, almost $500,000 for a single coin. So, how do you identify a valuable 1965 Kennedy half in fine condition? First, weigh the coin. Standard 40% silver halves should come in at around 11.5 grams. If your coin tips the scale at 12.5 grams, you may have one of those elusive 90% silver transitional errors. Next, examine the details. Even in fine condition, sharp hairlines on Kennedy's portrait and strong feathers on the eagle can increase desirability. Finally, check for doubling in Liberty and In God We Trust. A double die variety could turn an ordinary coin into a life-changing discovery. Think about it. A coin that was passed around in the summer of 1965, used to buy gas, groceries, or maybe even a night at the movies, could today be worth more than most people's annual salary. That's the incredible magic of coin collecting history, rarity, and luck colliding in one small piece of metal. And the journey doesn't stop here. We still have two more Kennedy half dollars to uncover, each more unbelievable than the last. So before we move to the next rarity, make sure you subscribe to us Mint Mysteries. Trust me, the final coins in the series will leave you absolutely speechless. As we near the end of our journey, we arrive at a coin that many people think of as common pocket change, but which hides some of the most shocking surprises in the Kennedy half-dollar series. The 1984 Kennedy half-dollar. For most of us, 1984 brings back memories of Ronald Reagan's America, the Los Angeles Olympics, and a booming decade of change. But few people realize that in this very year, the mint produced half-dollars that would one day stun collectors with values climbing into the tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's start with the design. On the obverse, you'll see President John F. Kennedy's bold profile, as powerful in 1984 as it was the very first year in 1964. The date sits below, with Liberty framing the rim and In God We Trust stretching across his portrait. Flip it over, and the reverse still carries the heraldic eagle, wings spread wide, arrows in one claw, olive branch in the other, 50 stars circling the rim. By 1984, the Kennedy half-dollar was no longer seen in most people's daily pocket change. They were struck mainly for collectors and used less often in circulation, which means high-quality survivors today are much harder to find than you might think. Now, let's talk about value. In fine condition, your 1984 Kennedy half-dollar might appear worn, with some of Kennedy's hairline smoothed and the eagle's wings softened. Even so, collectors often pay $2 to $5 because these coins weren't as widely saved as earlier issues. But the numbers climb quickly when we move into mint state coins. And Ms. 65 1980 for Kennedy half can bring $150 to $300. At Ms. 67, values jump into the $1,500 to $2,000 range. And then comes the shocker and Ms. 68, virtually flawless, hammered down at auction for over $12,000. That's more than 20,000 times its face value. But the story doesn't end there. The San Francisco Mint also struck proof coins in 1984, and the deep cameo silver proofs are highly prized. A perfect 70 example has been known to fetch $10,000 to $15,000, depending on demand. And of course, the most dramatic treasures come from minting errors. Imagine holding a 1984 Kennedy half-struck off-center, where Kennedy's portrait is shifted dramatically toward the rim, or a double die error, where the word liberty shows ghostly doubling. Some of these mistakes have sold for $25,000 to $50,000. The most jaw-dropping example? A 1984 Kennedy half struck on a wrong planchet error using a blank meant for a foreign coin verified by PCGs. Sold for nearly $275,000. One small mistake at the mint transformed a 50-cent piece into a six-figure treasure. So, how can you tell if your 1984 Kennedy half is valuable? Start with condition. Even in fine condition, if the details are strong and there are no major scratches, collectors will pay a premium. Next, check the mint mark. Look just above the date for a small D or P. Proofs will show an S. If you find an S proof with deep mirror surfaces and frosted details, you might have a winner. And always inspect the lettering and numbers for doubling. A slight doubling on "In God We Trust" or the date could mean thousands. Now imagine this. A coin that most Americans tossed into arcade machines or change drawers in the 1980s could today be worth enough to pay off medical bills, buy a new car, or even set aside money for retirement. That's the thrill of this hobby. Ordinary coins transformed into treasures through rarity, condition, and sheer luck. And here's the exciting part. We've saved the biggest shocker for last. Our final coin is one of the most breathtaking Kennedy half dollars ever struck, and its value will absolutely leave you stunned. Before we reveal it, make sure you're subscribed to us Mint Mysteries, because trust me, you don't want to miss this grand finale.